So, welcome to the show, Deborah. You know what? I just realized that my whole introduction, I never said your last name. So,
Lu-
and then I realized that I don't even know how to pronounce your last name.
well, I'll
So,
tell you. Lukovich.
Lukovic,
Yeah, Lukovich.
Lukovich.
Mhm.
Is that from like Poland or something?
Croatia.
Croatia.
Croatian.
Oh,
Although
okay.
I don't think it's in the original format. I think it was changed, so I heard, but and it might have been originally Luchevich. So, but I like Lukovich.
Lukovic. Yeah,
Yeah, I like it.
cool. So, as I realized and and I've been following you on Twitter for almost 2 years now.
Okay.
And I finally struck up the courage to connect with you, and
Aw.
because it was like because you say some pretty awesome stuff on Twitter, um, and for those listening, is like if you want to follow Deborah on Twitter, it's really easy because you just type in her name it and there it is. She searches really well through Twitter and a lot of other social media. And anyway, so depth psychology, I'm having like my brain can understands quantum physics and a lot of Eastern philosophy, but my brain is having trouble with depth psychology. And you've made like you do coaching and everything around this, and it's like and you have a for real PhD in depth psychology. So how did you get there?
Well, first of all, I want to say that if you enjoy the Eastern approach to spirituality and you love the
Mhm.
quantum realm, that's very much in alignment with depth psychology. In fact, Wolfgang Pauli,
Yeah.
so who I don't know exactly what his role is, but he was very important, like a century ago, and sort of these theories about quantum. And he and Carl Jung, one of the founders of depth psychology, were pen pals.
Yeah. I
So
when you look at Wikipedia, you see these people pop up, and um, because the quanta is this little package of energy. So maybe if we apply one, we can have little packages of reality.
well, I don't know. Depth psychology is a great for those of us who I think it's a great bridge actually between spirituality and science because while so many people think they're really two different things, they're really not. They're just different lenses, right? Through which to, and they
Yeah,
ask different questions. And I have found depth psychology to be really a bridge and even a bridge between people who have a very definite, who are attached to a doctrine, a religious doctrine, and the psychological experience of religion. So depth
yeah,
psychology is and the fact that you're like, I don't even really know how to wrap my arms around this is really a reflection of the fact that depth psychology is the study of the unconscious and psychology, the root of the word psychology is soul and it's breath. So the
mhm,
root of psychology in the field of psychology is has to do with soul and meaning. And today you would think it has to do with the brain. And all the research on the brain may just confirm, you know, these depth
yeah,
psychology theories, but that's not psychology. Psychology is about healing and soul and finding meaning. So to answer your question about how it found me, because that's what happened, is it was a synchronicity.
mhm,
I was having a midlife unraveling. So you could say I had lived the first part of my life in a very uh, business plan oriented way, which we
okay,
would say is a masculine approach to life, not meaning man or male, but meaning
mm,
linear, goal setting, achievement oriented,
yeah,
forward looking, externally looking, that sort of thing, using reason and the mind and the intellect, spirit, spiritual, heaven, that's all masculine. And as somebody who came of age in the 80s, especially a woman who came of age in the 80s, we really had to develop our masculine sense in order to fit into the world of business or whatever. And so suddenly I found myself having an unraveling and got to the point where I was sort of lost and realized I couldn't fix things. And that was really hard for me. I'm a recovering control freak, recovering perfectionist, not controlling of others, but controlling of myself and my emotions. And so all that sort of started falling apart. And then there was this day that I went on a walk with my family. And on the way to the walk, it started raining. And I was excited. It was a summer rain. It was warm. I was like, oh, this is so romantic. And my now ex-husband, but my former husband was like, cranky. And he got the kids cranky. And then I'm like, you know what? Fine. I'm just walking by myself. But I had this like little realization. It was my first little insight that snuck out of my unconscious. And it was like, oh, this is familiar. This feeling of just being exhausted, of having to negotiate and mediate the energies between all the members of my family. And we went, they followed me. We went into this old fashioned pharmacy and I made a beeline to the magazine rack. And I hadn't bought a yoga journal in a really long time. And I was like, I don't know, I want to buy a yoga journal. And that night in the bathroom, I don't usually read when I'm going to the bathroom, but I was paging through the back page and there it was, a logo for Pacifica Graduate Institute with a program, a master's PhD in depth psychology. And I was like, what is that? And it was red and orange and fiery and alchemical. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I have to have it. And I went to my computer and I'm like, I've heard of Carl Jung, but I don't know. This is so mysterious. What is this language? And I knew it was like the first time in my life that I listened to an irrational desire and I became fixated on getting myself to that program. Now, a lot of stuff happened in between. By the time I got there, it was really a defining moment in my marriage and all of that, but it really was a synchronicity. So I had a moment of surrender. And surrender doesn't mean giving up, but it does
Mhm.
mean surrendering and being open to extraordinary knowing, to a different source of wisdom other than the mind. So I didn't know why, what I was going to do with it was very expensive. And even when I got there, I still didn't know what I was going to do with it, but it was very clear that the purpose was to help me understand and find meaning in my own life. And then when I went on for the PhD coursework, I was like, what am I going to research? I don't know. I love education. Let's talk about a Jungian approach to education. And then I was called to study, and my research is on women's experience of reconciling sexuality and spirituality through this theory that Jung calls individuation. And I was like, no, I don't want to research sex and God. What? But I was led. So again, it was a series of just very mysterious synchronicities that because I was so at a loss of what to do and how to fix my life, I had to let it go. I had to fall apart. And then I had to become comfortable with not knowing. And so that's how I
Yeah.
got there. And then after I got there, it was amazing how every course came in the nick of time. Every theory I lived. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm living what they're talking about. I'm in the grip of a complex right now. I'm sweating. And it was just interesting. And as I look back, it was clear that that was a plan, a hidden unconscious agenda from my unconscious. And now, of course, all of that eventually turned into a sense of new purpose. And now I'm on a mission to grow a movement of self reflecting humans. And I do that in many ways through depth psychology coaching, books, blog, podcast, and all of that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a Reader's Digest version of the story.
Go to her website and you get the longer version too.
And the juicy stuff that was not needed in my dissertation, which is about sex and God, is coming out in the memoir that's coming soon.
Oh, cool. So
Yeah.
we'll have to talk more about the memoir
Yes.
and how to get it and how to get the audiobook and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
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 Oh, very cool. Uh, because well, our modern sexuality is based on something that happened about 15 more than 1,500 years ago with um, Emperor Constantine trying to figure out how to fix the Roman Empire so it would survive for thousands of years later. And he came up with the Catholic Church.
Oh.
No, you think about the like how a lot of the morality that's out there that sex is bad, and if you want to have sex, that there's something wrong with you, and that we're finally in our modern age trying to figure that unravel that part. It's like, yeah,
Well, I love the topic of sexuality and spirituality.
yeah,
And but I come at it from with a different lens, a depth psychology lens. And
uh,
unfortunately, we're not educated about how to have a framework to really understand the deeper meaning of sexuality and sexual attraction and sexual arousal, because
uh,
sexuality is it's creative intelligence, it's creative energy. And so I help people understand that instead of, for example, if you have a sexual fantasy
mhm,
and it includes, for example, oh, during my own midlife reconstruction, I had a fantasy, and we think we make fantasies, but no, we don't. We receive fantasies. They're images, spontaneous, that come up from the unconscious, and
mhm,
sometimes they can cause embarrassment, right? So I had a submission fantasy, and it tortured me all day long. I'd be sitting in the middle of a business meeting, and I'm like having this sexual submission fantasy. I'm like, go away, stop it, go. Like, what are you? Stop it! What are you doing? And not until I drew it. So I literally went on Google and said, how do you draw a naked man standing with an erect penis? How do you draw a naked woman on her knees, like in front of this man? And when I drew it, I wrote the words receptive. I wrote the word receptive. And so you might have thought that my fantasy wanted to be acted out literally, and there was a little bit of that going on, but it really, the deeper meaning was a need to be receptive to myself, my capital S self. So in depth psychology, Carl Jung talks about an ordering principle, this higher part of you. I don't know, you could call it an intuition, and but it knows more about you than you do, and it's kind of prompting you towards growth. It doesn't make decisions for you. It's not like fate. It's about grow, grow, expand, expand, and brings you things that mirror back things that want to be
yeah,
explored in you, and then you expand your consciousness. So what I do with people is I have a space for them so we can explore sexuality. And sometimes there is a literal component of it. Sometimes it must be acted out in order to actually experience what wants to be experienced psychologically. But sometimes it doesn't need
mhm,
to be acted out. And so I love all of that. And for me, part of why there's so much dismantling going on, right? Dismantling of conventional forms of relationship
mhm.
and sexuality and gender. And I sometimes say, LGBTQA plus, what, like there's going to be so many letters at some point that we don't need any letters, right? That we just are.
Yeah, see that, and I'm waiting for that to happen because, well. I don't know if I've discussed this with you or not discussed this with you, because I do receive criticism because I wear a lot of pink, and then there's this thing out there that says, and it's in the school systems and everything, that says that if I wear pink, then I am a trans person.
Okay, so in the 80s, it was so cool for men to wear pink. I don't understand how we
Hey,
backtracked on that. It's so
you do,
fascinating.
and you also know that of course I was a teenager in the '80s, right? It's like,
Oh, so you're so confused now, right? Because you're like,
yeah,
I thought women liked it when men wore pink, and I mean, it's kind of crazy
yeah, but
the regression of
yeah,
tolerance and
yeah.
consciousness.
So,
But
in it's like, I don't always like, if I have to go into the downtown area because I live out towards the beach. If I had to go into the downtown area, I take the bus
Mhm.
because I don't want to drive in traffic, right? So I'm standing around waiting for the bus, and I had on some sort of strappy 3-inch heel sandal thing, right? And in s- uh, a sport jacket, pink shirt, and bell-bottom jeans, right? And this woman comes up to me and she says, "How do you identify yourself?"
That's a
Uh,
really bold question to ask a stranger. Like, you could be like,
but I give her credit for asking the question
well, she was
because
curious.
yeah, she was curious, so she asked the question, or so I thought she was curious. Um, so I answered the question. I said, "Well, simply put, I'm me," and she says, "Well, what does that mean?
That's a
Are
great
are
answer.
are you are are you into men? Are you?" I said, "No." I said, I'm actually married to a woman, and I just like to dress like this. It's just my fashion." And she's like, "Oh, well." Then she went into started leading into a church full of gay people where I can be open to be who I am. And you can come out too, and no one will harm you.
Oh, that's so fascinating.
It was like this it's like in my brain is like, because I have that science need to ask questions, poke, prod, experiments, or so I started curtailing my language so that it would see how far is she gonna go with this before the bus comes? Because now I'm
Right.
curious.
Yeah, I
Like,
love it.
but the thing is that that language that she was asking me about, um, is, of course, in our school systems now, and and I didn't know how far it was going because, hey, I don't know about you, my kids are grown. They're in
Mhm.
I've actually had one graduate from university. So
Yeah, I have 2. Yeah.
so I'm like, well, what do you mean? Talking to to this person who has children in elementary school, and at 10 years old, they were talking about, oh, well, if you like to play with this, then you have to be a trans person.
Oh, what?
I'm like,
Oh,
well, wait, that doesn't make sense. It's like all kinds of
no.
things are going
Okay,
off in my head, right?
all it is just new categories, trying to shove people in new categories. Well, this is
Well,
first of all, there's
yeah,
so much to this interaction, and there's actually a couple depth psychology concepts that come into play.
yeah,
So, there's projection, right? So,
mhm,
projection, simply put, is we project our worldview, our life experience onto other people's experiences, right? So that's basically it. But we relate through projection. We don't relate unless there's projection. So it just is. It just happens all the time. So as we interact, or as she asked you a question, I mean, there's projection going on. I mean, she didn't it's it she's also an example of how very well-meaning people can actually uh can actually continue unintentionally intolerance,
Eh,
right? It
yeah,
was just a
right.
different it's just a different kind of tolerance. It's like I bought a book about a year ago called Nice Racism, and the subtitle is How White Progressive People Unintentionally perpetuate
Yeah,
subtle racism, right? So this is another example of she's all like, "Hey, look at me. I go to a welcoming church. You're welcome at my church, even if you're this or that." And you're like, why do you want to put me in a box? Like, I'm glad you're curious. I'm glad like you go to a very welcoming church,
right.
but you're still part of this problem that is still just trying to move around the categories, even though you're tolerant of all the categories, but you still want to like categorize people.
Right. And that was one of those things that okay, another layer for myself, that as a pastor, that I was like, but we can't just point our finger and say those people.
Hmm.
And while the church is opening in a lot of ways, which is very cool, um, we still have to find our way around to stop saying those
Well,
people.
it's condescending because you are me. Like she doesn't realize that you're mirroring back her something that she needs to explore in herself. She's so curious, right? And she fancies herself as a very welcoming person, but her line of questioning really is mirroring back. She has a lot more work to do about her own
Yeah.
self-acceptance because in the end it's about your comfort with yourself.
So let me ask you this, because we both have trails back into the 1980s. um, at what age did you finally learn to like yourself, and at what age did you learn to love yourself?
Um I don't really know how to answer that question. When I some more depth psychology for you. Uh, Part of coming into deeper relationship with yourself is to find the origins of your patterns, right? Your patterns of belief and behaving and thinking and your your outlook on life and your worldview and that sort of thing. And when I came into relationship with my mother wounds, my parental complexes, I realized that my role for my mother was to be an example of how she was a better mother than her abusive mother. So she
Right.
wanted to do better,
Mm.
but in doing better, how would she know she was doing better except by my behavior? So I really existed to mirror back to her that she was doing. So in a way, the answer to your question is I didn't really have my own identity. I existed for the purpose of mirroring back something to somebody. So it wouldn't be until my midlife unraveling that I sort of came to understand that. Now, I always liked myself. I was debilitatingly shy. I had been bullied. I'm an INFJ, meaning introverted and intuitive. And so I'm like 3% of the entire world's population are people like me. So I'm sensitive. I'm in touch. I'm always in touch with something bigger that's going on, something archetypal. So I can also be very overwhelmed. And to say I'm self conscious is an understatement, but self conscious doesn't necessarily mean that you're insecure. It means you're conscious of every single movement, every breath that you're taking, and you're also open to the energies that flow in from other people. So it can be a very overwhelming experience. So, but I was very forward looking, and
Mm.
so I didn't and I became an activist at a young age, in my 20s. I was an activist. So I sort of found my confidence in advocating for others. So I didn't really have to think about myself. I knew that I had goals. I wanted to be a business person, and I advocated, and I found meaning by my desire to make the world a better place. So that actually in a way is a diversion. In fact, when I was 48, I was receiving an award from United Way in Milwaukee. It was a Philanthropic 5 award, and I prepared my 5-minute speech. And part of it was like what you would assume somebody getting an award would say, like, I remembered all these women who encouraged me and said, "Yes, of course you can do that, Deb." So I needed that, but I found those women. So I always did what terrified me anyway. And then as I read my last sentence up at the podium in front of 150 people, I said, "Oh, I discovered I make a difference walking around being me." And I started sobbing because I hadn't known that. I hadn't believed that. And in order to actually get that insight, I would have had to shift it. So that's kind of an answer to your question, is that in that moment, I
Wow.
realized that, oh, I exist. I am worthy because I exist. Now, what did that do? Well, now I had to deal with, oh my God. So my hidden agenda for being an activist was validation? Oh, crap. So everything has a light and a dark side. So being an activist, was that a good thing? Yes, I did a lot of great work. But if you're being an activist out of a need for validation, that's not altruism. No,
Um,
no, no, nope, not if you're doing it out of need. So
yeah,
when I
no,
just
I'm agreeing with you. I'm not
when
disagreeing
I
with you, but
discovered, oh, it's very cringy to experience like the shame of like your hidden agenda behind things, but that's the unconscious, is you want to be aware of what is the hidden agenda behind what you're doing. So after that, I came into better relationship with my new purpose of building a movement of self-reflecting humans. I don't need to do it. I don't need it to feel good about myself. I do it, which means that is altruistic. I don't need to be good at it. I don't need to do it. And guess what? If I don't need to do it, I can fully unleash because I'm not worried about how I'm doing it. I don't need the validation anymore. So, you know what I'm saying? So, that's a really long answer to your question about, I always liked myself and I always did what terrified me and I dealt with that. And then there was that moment where I was like, oh, I'm just worthy because I'm here. That's self-love.
yeah, yeah, no, no,
So 48.
that that is the answer I was kind of looking for, and the answer that a lot of people need to hear. Um, and because there's a lot out there in, like our families and everything is like, I don't know who you think you are, but you don't need to do that. We don't do that. Why do you think that you need to have your own business? And it's like, why don't you just do what we do and we're perfectly fine? You're the abnormal one. And it's like you hear all that noise
Yeah.
from
Well,
people around you in that way,
it's hard though, and the person who hears that, it's not easy to change, or it's not easy to be you when people around you don't validate that it's okay for you to be you. That requires being able to realize that people who are telling you not to be different, you're threatening to them. By you being different, you're shining a light on what needs to be explored in themselves. It's really shining a light on their own sense of insecurity. So don't do that. You're making me feel like I'm not exploring myself, and I don't want to be reminded that I'm not exploring myself. But if you don't become yourself and become authentic, you're actually enabling those around you to not explore themselves. So you're not helping them by conforming, By you being brave enough to not conform and to be authentic, you're disrupting this little codependent pattern where you each affirm and confirm what's always been, and you're shaking up the energy. And it's none of your business how they respond to your authenticity. But if you become authentic, you liberate them from your part of the codependent thing or the psychological core, the thing that they're expecting you to respond to them in a certain way. And when you have the courage to disrupt that, you're giving them a gift. So if you look at it that way, because especially for some women, they're uncomfortable like claiming their space in the world. But if they understand that claiming your purpose in the world actually liberates other people to do the same.
Right.
And a lot of people are more comfortable with that, knowing that, oh, like seriously, like if I advocate for myself, I'm actually helping them. Yes, you are. You're shining a light. You're disrupting the energy. I call it kind of a form of nonviolent resistance because psychologically, what that means is you're just disrupting the pattern enough where there's a space that opens up and confuses the other person because they're like, she didn't respond the way that she usually does. What's going on there? And in that space, they're vulnerable, you're vulnerable, and then there is a potential connection that can be
Yeah.
made. And then, we don't know what they'll do with that, but that's none of our business.
True. And but that's the beauty part of the not knowing what they'll do with it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not your
And
responsibility. It is your responsibility to claim your own psychology.
hmm, agreed. I like that. So we should make that a bumper sticker or something. No, sorry, be going back to the '80s thing again.
Well, I know. Here's a good bumper sticker. When you understand someone's psychology, their behavior makes perfect sense. When you
Mm,
understand your own psychology, everything you've ever done makes perfect sense. So you don't have to feel bad about it. Like when you understand your psychology, everything you've ever done is like, well, of course I did that. That makes perfect sense
yeah,
because there's a lot of self judgment. A lot of self judgment is what keeps people from coming into deeper relationship with themselves.
yeah. What was the one thing that you were curious about that besides depth psychology? We got into we you already answered part of that question. That the whole idea that you are who you are is because of a curiosity and a drawing. But
It was an
that's
obsession.
that was a wonderful discovery that and that did a beautiful picture that you painted. I wish
Okay.
I could turn it into a movie for you.
Oh, well, I do have a vision that my memoir will become a movie or an online series or something. It is part of my vision.
Oh boy, we're in trouble.
We'll see.
It's
I don't know.
I mean that in a very kind and joking way.
I know.
Uh, um, but what maybe something else about you, a quirky thing that you actually do or that you always do that started out as a curiosity and then it just became part of you.
Uh, well, I would say I'm a self-proclaimed nerd. Oh, this is a recent nerdy thing or quirky thing. There's
Mhm.
a whole field, subfield, and psychology is so huge. You're right about that. There's a
Hmm.
whole field called Jungian film theory. And during a phase, well, during I call my midlife unraveling, reconstruction, and then I don't know what phase I'm in right now, but now I'm like unleashing, I guess is what it is. But during my unraveling, there were certain films that helped me gain insights about myself. And one I suggest that everybody watch because I think the theme is if you're wondering about your parental complexes, the origins of all your patterns of thinking and behaving. Of course, they're in your childhood. That's your first experience of relating to other human beings. Watch the movie Into the Woods. There's all kinds of stars in it, like Chris Pine and Emma Blunt and Meryl Streep. And oh my gosh, like it's filled with stars. And it takes five fairy tales, because fairy tales, of course, represent archetypal experiences, right? Like universal experiences, coming of age, falling in love, the hero's journey, things like that. And the similarity of all the fairy tales is that there's always the woods. And the woods is the place of transformation. The woods is a place of fear. The woods is a place of getting lost. You have to get lost and then fall apart. And then you have to find new pieces of you. So I was like, not only found what I found when I watched this movie is I came to understand my former husband's parental complexes more. And so each time that comes up in a depth psychology coaching session with a client where I'm like, I don't know, I feel like you should watch the film Into the Woods. Oh, they come back and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I saw something I couldn't see before." Because the unconscious speaks through images. Image is the language of the unconscious. An image isn't just a visual image. It's a, I well, this is my definition. It's an impression. So an emotion is an image. Uh
Mm.
a symbol, which is not a sign, that's different. A symbol is an image. A temperature can be an image. You wake up and all you notice about a dream is that you were in the wind or something like that, and there was this sort of that is an image that you can explore. So fairy tales are great for images. So anyway, that gets me
Mhm.
to then one of my papers in my master's part of the program was analyzing 50 Shades of Grey. It
Oh,
wasn't a book that I read. I'm mostly a nonfiction reader, but my sister reading it really intrigued me. And she's like, "This is a love story." That's how I read it. And then the first movie came out, and I saw the movie, and I was like, why I wrote about it was the responses were extreme. There was a kind of liberating response,
yeah.
and then there was also this judgmental, fearful response. And whenever there's that movie is meant to hold the tension between what is perceived to be an opposition. That's another depth psychology concept that Jung called the transcendent third. So any time of growth, any kind of growth psychologically is about, oh, there's this and it's in conflict with this. How do I reconcile these two ideas? We're witnessing, living through the ultimate climaxing of what is perceived to be an opposition. And the collective unconscious is begging for a reconciliation of what is perceived to be in opposition. So anyway, that I analyzed that movie on different levels, and then I didn't realize that it was speaking to me and that led to sort of that fantasy about submission that had more to do with me surrendering and submitting to my own sort of self,
Right.
which is the bridge to the divine. And for me, there wasn't a divine. I'm like, I'm here all by myself. So then I went
Mm.
through, so as I gained insights from these films, then during my reconstruction, it was the fall of 2019, and there were three movies: Gravity, uh, Interstellar, and oh, sorry to make you cough like that. So
No, because I've seen those
you got
movies.
all excited. Interstellar, Gravity, and the other one was Matt Damon. Was it The Martian or Mars or something like that? And those movies, what I saw in there is they each had this nuanced reconciliation of the masculine and feminine. And I could have a whole like chat about what that was, but it really is like our collective trying to reconcile these masculine and feminine and have them come into not so much as balance but equal appreciation for each of those movements.
Well,
Then oh,
see, there was another movie in there. I wonder if you saw it with Meryl Streep. Don't look up.
Oh,
because it
yes, yes.
because it was a whole comedy that was based on some of the same topic matter that was in the other three movies, but they did it in such a funny way that you just
Oh,
cracked yourself up through the whole movie.
well, you could have a whole conversation about how fantastic and how it's not even fictional, right? Like Don't Look Up is actually happening right now. So and then the last series of movies were sci-fi or superhero movies.
Mhm.
And one of the most powerful one, and I would recommend this for people who want to explore themselves, is to see how they experience the movie called Alita: Battle Angel. It's full of imagery and lots of opposites and self-discovery. So I don't even remember why. The reason is that I brought this up was that during part of my experience, once I came into deeper relationship with like my own patterns and parental complexes, and I found I have a fear of feeling trapped, and that's why I have to sit on an aisle in an airplane and movie theater, and like, why am I doing that? Because I felt suffocated by my mother, all that kind of stuff. Once you understand your personal complexes, then the doorway opens up for the archetypal energies to come and use you. So
Mm,
once you are more solid in yourself, the archetypal energies can use you for the benefit of expanding consciousness out there. So those movies like Alita Battle Angel helped me see what was going on beneath the surface of the collective, which is why I can stay sane given what's going on right now, is that I can see the archetypal and the alchemical thing that's going on, that the climaxing of, for example, the regression of
yeah.
hatred and intolerance, but also countered by a movement of more individual self-reflection, that the work that I do and my clients do is making them different people, and that will eventually coalesce into new ideas, into new expansion of consciousness. And so that's how I stay sane.
That's a lot to stay sane with. Okay, because
Oh, so
we
now you know how I'm
we
now you know how I'm a nerd. That's my
yes.
nerd.
Yeah.
That's my quirky.
See, that's
Sorry.
cle that is clearly, nerdy there. It is.
Yeah.
Okay, but for sake of argument and getting back to some of the format of the show, because we just threw it all to the wind there for a while. Uh, what is some of the things that you want people work with you? What do you want them to get out of working with you?
Well, uh, I mean, bottom line, that they come into deeper relationship with their self, capital S, which then, and that's good enough right there. So if many people come to me because they feel stuck in a relationship, stuck in a career.
Mhm.
Some people come to me because they feel called, but the calling is to an unknown place, which is terrifying. And because they don't know the answer and how to get there, they find themselves not able to take a step. Other people, other people come to me, they're already creative, but they know they have some work to do, that there's stuff in their shadow, their unconscious, that they know that they need to explore, and that will impact their writing or their music or whatever it is. My vision for them, and I tell them this, is that, oh, you have no idea how important you are. You're so important to the world and expansion of consciousness, that once you come into deeper relationship with yourself, the next part is to surrender to creative intelligence. And that can be terrifying. I have a client right now that we talked today about how he is diverting himself by urges to go gamble and drink, and just normal like partying, but he knows it's a diversion.
Yeah.
And I connected it with, or today we talked about how that is a diversion because we can be terrified of our own potential, because our potential isn't just ours, right? Creative intelligence partners with us, but that's an unknown. That's mysterious. And so it's like an example is I had a colleague ask me to write a review of his book. I just wrote my blog post on this if people want to check it out. It's a really a blog post that I haven't written in a long time, something very bold, and it has to do with self-reflection in a time of conspiracy theories and looking at fundamentalism religion. Like it's a heavy topic.
Wow.
And I was procrastinating, and it was because I knew I couldn't just like willy-nilly do this, but I was afraid. There was a fear, and I'm like, "Oh my god." So finally, last Sunday, I sat down at my favorite place and had a glass of wine or whatever, 8 hours, and I wrote this thing, and I did not do it by myself. I had to trust that something was gonna come in and use me, and in partnership, I wrote this blog post, and it's, like, fantastic. So that's what I want for my clients is that they get to that point and then they're able to see that they might divert themselves from their greatness, but their greatness is not in service to the ego, it's in service to the collective. So if my clients never go there, that's fine. If they're just happier and more accepting of themselves and they feel like they can do what they desire to do, that's awesome.
Wow. That's one hell of a result you just handed somebody.
I know. I love it. And believe
Yeah.
me, I in my depth psychology coaching sessions, when I come to life, I am not alone. I am inviting and
Mm.
surrendering to creative intelligence in
Yeah.
that session.
Well, yeah, okay, so that creative intelligence, um, it's it's that that thing, that energy that just flows through the entire universe, isn't it? You're just
Yeah.
kind of
So yeah, some people
scooping a
call it
little bit up and or allowing it to scoop you up.
yeah, I mean some people call it God,
Yeah.
source, the quantum
Like,
realm, the field of
I
potentiality. I don't know. It doesn't really
oh, see,
matter.
that was a good one. I like that, the field of potentiality.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's it's very, very physics too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love
No,
physics.
it's simply I call it love.
Yes, love, the highest frequency, the highest vibrational
Yeah,
frequency, love. Yeah,
yeah.
so it
So,
doesn't matter what you call it. What it is it's a sense that you're tapping into something that's not you, but you're part of it. It's that. And, and when you start to be aware of like when it's there, it can be scary to people if they don't realize, right? It's a
yeah.
religious those are religious experiences,
Yeah, see,
numinous
religious,
experiences.
without having to reference back to the big
Well,
dogma things.
remember, today we think of religion as doctrine or dogma. The origin of the root religion and
Well,
religious had nothing to do with writing belief systems. It had to do with, the religious instinct is an instinct to find meaning, to explore your relationship with source. I mean, that's all religious, is. But now, because there is this dismantling also of conventional religious forms because they haven't been able to keep up, that then people, just because people are
yeah,
non-religious, it's offensive to say that they're also not spiritual or not religious. They just don't attach themselves to a doctrine. So I mean there are some people who are like, yeah, no, I'm not spiritual either, but I would, after having a conversation with them, I'm usually like, "Well, but you are spiritual, but that's okay that's a
well,
bad word for you too."
yeah. Well, usually what I do with a lot of people in those situations, because I love playing with people. It's so much fun. Ah, oh, did I just say that?
Yeah, you did.
I I leave spirit, religion, all that out, and I just substitute in the word energy, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like because they're willing to accept that.
Yeah.
So, and then but and then by the end of the conversation, they're like, "Oh,
I am spiritual.
I
Yeah.
am spiritual."
Yeah,
Yeah,
that you're not
because we're
playing
all
with.
spiritual. We have because we have the energy.
Yeah. You're not playing with them. You're just like finding like a universal translator.
Yeah.
You're just
Well,
speaking in language that they're okay with.
you do that. You
What?
just did something really cool. Do you know the okay, know the name of our business, and I'm being a little egotistical because I'm gonna say the name of my business, Depictions Media, or
Mhm.
in the middle of my podcast. I usually don't do that. But anyway, but the media part is going back to the ancient views of things. Media is that space in the middle that the information has to pass through
Hmm.
and and find direction from.
So
That's
what did
why it's
Oh,
media,
okay.
not because, it's not the modern way of thinking of media where we
Right.
build.
A medium. So like a medium.
Yeah, mhm,
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I like it.
yeah, that's why I
Oh,
picked
so when I
the business
said
that
when
way.
I called you a translator,
The translator,
universal
yeah.
translator.
It's like, that's
Yeah.
why I say, "Hey, that's really cool how you did that. That was pretty cool."
I didn't even know what I did.
Yeah, it was source.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can have fun all the time like that and play with different words because you use the word masculine in a very ancient way also.
Mhm.
And I liked how you use it because it was a very way of linear thing because feminine means like that. I describe feminine as that cauldron, the ideas bubble up and
Oh, the womb, the
yeah,
vessel, the
yeah,
feminine is the unconscious. That's why there is
yeah.
a fear of the feminine. It's a fear of the unconscious. And the feminine is meandering. The
Well,
feminine
we
is
should be embracing it at this point, shouldn't we?
right. The feminine is looks for patterns and connections, is strategic and sorts and is patient and circles back to relating, is relating oriented. The feminine is where, yeah, where the something's being created, but the masculine is needed to bring form to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's the whole balance
Yeah.
of the ancient symbols.
Yeah, and I think it's not so much about balance as about fluidity because there are times for the masculine and
Mhm.
there are times for the feminine. And sometimes, I mean, I had like a during the beginning of my PhD research, the books that I was called to read, I felt like I had to read the whole book. You can't read the whole book of every book that ends up being a reference in your dissertation, and it scared me. But it was where I started. I started with Jungian ideas and depth psychological perspective about religion is where I started, and it was like a bottomless pit for me. I love it. I love the topic, and and I was like, oh my god, how am I going to finish? I just when is this going to stop? And then one day, my dissertation, my committee chair emailed me and asked, "Hey, how's it going?" And I was like, I snapped out of a trance. It was like, "Oh." And then I felt like something had ended, some kind of feminine space had ended where all I was doing was like absorbing, 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 and things were mixing in me. And I didn't know, I couldn't make any sense of it. And then I think I started writing, and then the next books that I read, I was like, "Oh, okay, all I need is this chapter." all I need is this section. But there was something about, and I was called to those books. I'd go to my bookshelf and I'd be like, yep, this is the one. This is the one. That's the feminine. The feminine is mysterious. And then when I had to sit down, and then I even said to her, I said, oh, time to bring my masculine. Like, I got to get going here.
Yeah.
I need to take what's been stirring in me and I need to bring form to it in the form of notes or in the form of writing or conclusions or whatever it is. So that's kind of how what I think the goal is this fluidity, and it is a partnership. And for part partnerships are hard work. They take consciousness. Equality is hard work. Tolerance is hard work. Spirituality, there's different levels of spirituality. The
Mhm.
lowest level, which some people will be on the level one, is tell me how to think and how to behave. And there's a really great book. uh, Robin Rob, Robin Robertson wrote a depth psychology interpretation of the book of Revelation. So the Old Testament is like, okay, here's what we think our relationship with source is. He's out there, he's mean, he's a he, all this stuff. New Testament, oh, our source is actually, we're part of source. Source comes closer to us. Book of Revelation, no theologians know what it means. But if you read a depth psychology perspective, you will make so much sense of what's going on right now. And you'll even, the seven churches are in his interpretation, these seven levels of spirituality. And, the level where you actually need to hold the tension between the old idea and where we're being called, and how do you find the transcendent third, the new idea that includes expansiousness of consciousness is love, right? So everybody's playing their role. They
Yeah.
really are. Like,
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to say this as the theologian because I have one series of degrees in theology,
oh yeah, that's oh
right? Um, and I also have another series of degrees that are very science based in chemistry and stuff like that,
oh,
right?
I
So
love
anyway,
it.
my yin and my yang, whatever. Um, I want to say this, that Revelations is also it's a dream, it's a vision,
Mhm.
like, and it's very unconscious as you keep going at it, right?
Yes.
So this is the reason why we're trying to put conscious thought to it. It will never make sense that way.
No,
So
it's so image oriented. Oh my
yes,
gosh.
yes. So anyway, I hate to say this, but we ran out of time. So you got to tell people how to get a hold of you.
Oh, okay, you can find all things Deborah Lukovich at deborahlukovich.com. At the top are all my social tags, my YouTube channel, my Dose of Depth podcast, my following me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it is. And then I have a blog. And then I have my book, Your Soul is Talking. Are you listening? I actually read every chapter as a separate episode on my Dose of Depth podcast. So you can actually listen to it for free. You can listen to me read it. And what else? Yeah, that's where you can find everything about me. And then on my homepage, if you want to explore the possibility of depth psychology coaching, I offer a 30-minute free exploratory chat. And there's a button that'll take you to my profile on Heal Me, and you can schedule through there. So that's me. And then I'm still looking for people to be on my launch team for my memoir. So I definitely just have to get it out and launch it before the end of the year. So that's my
Well,
goal. So I'm looking for help.
we'll have to talk more about that because
Okay.
um
Awesome.
so everybody go to deborahleakovich.com and um the one of the things that's going to pop up in a few seconds after you've been there, and you're going to type in when the thing pops up, type in your email address, type in all the other information they asked for, and click the submit button so that you get more information from Deborah. It's like I've subscribed to Deborah's website and into a lot of her thinking a long time ago, and she has never ceased to amaze me. So anyway, with that being said, thank everybody for listening. Find that subscribe button wherever it may be, because you're going to hear more from Deborah um, in the future, I'm sure. And you can get more updates and inspiring stories from everybody that we've listened to, that we have interviewed, and by clicking that subscribe button. All right. Talk to talk to you later, everybody.
Thank you.